Hey, if we haven't met, my name is Tim. So glad that you guys are here. And we are concluding our series today, Living Our Mission. And to get things started, we're talking about light. That passage just talked about light. And as I was reflecting this week, there have been 2 times in my life where I would say I was scared of the dark. And for me to admit that, there's a certain level of vulnerability. Like, I don't want you to know that, but here's the reality. I'm scared of the dark, okay? And you hear that and you're like, who did we hire? No, I'm not talking like I need a nightlight in my room type of scared of the dark. I'm talking there have been 2 times in my life where it's like if I don't get light, I might die. First time, middle school. My brothers and their friends, and then me being the youngest of my brothers, I wanted to tag along with them, but we decided to go caving or spelunking in some caves. And we didn't go with professionals. We were the professionals, right? And we had discovered where we were living that there were caves close by. And so we're like, dude, we got to go check this out. So we go, and we're exploring these caves. 2 things I learned real quick. You make a few turns within a cave, all of a sudden you don't see the light anymore. And so you're clinging to your flashlight as though it is life, that you need it in order to survive. Second thing I learned is it's good to invest in good flashlights. We got to a point in the cave where we had to swim. Listen, this is dumb. Students don't do what we did, but we had to swim through one part of the cave to get to another part of the cave. No, my parents didn't know about this. Hi, Mom and Dad. So glad you're learning about it now. And our lights got wet and started to go out and flicker. And you imagine the feeling you get being deep in a cave, already having an experience. Hey, look what happens when you turn the light off. You can't see anything. And now, all of a sudden, it becomes reality of if this light goes out, I don't know how we're going to find our way back. I don't know if anyone knows where we're at. And so how will we survive? Thankfully, one of the flashlights we had just enough life, just enough flicker to get us back to where we could see the cave entrance. And it was like a load off of our shoulders. Second time. I'd like to admit it was in high school, but it was just a few years ago. And I'm reminded of this experience every time because right off of exit 11, there is a billboard for the Lost Sea Adventures. Another cave story. Get to see it every day. But it's great. If you got kids, family, go. It's fun. Like there's literally a sea in the middle of this cave that you get to take a boat ride on, and there's blind fish, so you can check that out. But you get to the point in the tour with a professional where they're like, hey, we're going to turn the lights out now, and you're going to experience absolute darkness. Like, okay, I've done that before. Let's see what happens. And so they're like, don't worry. The moment that you're going to feel like freaking out, we'll turn the lights on. It's like, okay, let's do this. So they turn the light off, and as soon as the light goes out, I don't know what comes over me. It feels like 100 pounds just gets put on my back. I start breathing heavy, and I don't know why or what, but I'm like, turn it on, like under my breath. Turn it on, trying with the people I'm with so that they don't think it's me. But then at a certain point, really quickly after that, I don't care. And I'm like, turn on the lights. And finally, they flip on the lights, and everyone's looking towards me because the voice was coming from that direction. And I'm just like, is this guy, trying to pass the blame, but in the moment, I don't know what came over me, but I was hoping the lights would come on, and they did, and Lost Sea Adventures proved to me that I am scared of the dark. There you go. I share this story, maybe because they're funny, but at the same time, as I was reading Matthew chapter 5 this week, it put into perfect perspective to me that we as the church, we as Christ's followers, what we're supposed to be to the world. Over the last few weeks, we've been talking about living our mission, the mission of every follower of Jesus that has been given to us. We put it this way, we're to love God, love people, and make disciples. Our expression of that mission here at Two Rivers Church is this right here. And we're going to say it together, all right? So here we go. You ready? On three, we're going to say this together. 1, 2, 3. We connect people to a caring family that is being transformed by Jesus to impact the world around us. Good. Hey, give yourself a round of applause. I hope by now you can say that. If not, we got little cards you can take with you. We want this to be on the forefront of your mind. But I love that this mission statement, that Jesus' mission for us doesn't just stop at life transformation, being transformed by Jesus. But if you look, it continues on to impact the world around us, to make disciples who make disciples who make disciples. Notice it doesn't stop there, that we were called for a purpose and to be on mission to impact the world around us. Now, I don't know about you, when I hear that, that sounds exciting at first, but then you start really thinking about it and you're like, seems like a lot of responsibility. How am I supposed to do that, right? You start playing out scenarios in your mind, and where do I start? And that's where we come back to Matthew chapter 5, verse 14. Jesus is talking and says, you are the light of the world. All right? I'm going to use this just as an illustration. Ooh, right? You are the light of the world. To understand this city metaphor, ooh, the lights are even going on. I wasn't planning. That's great. All right? To understand this city metaphor, though, imagine you're in a desert climate. Jesus is talking to people in Jerusalem, right? You're in a desert climate. And the idea that he is talking about, if you're lost in the desert and it's dark and you're talking as if you don't know where to go, where to turn, you're out of water, you're out of food, there's no hope, you don't know which way to turn because any direction you don't know if there is life. And then out in the distance, out of nowhere, you see a light shining. The amount of hope, the amount of joy, the amount of just pure excitement that you see a city off in the distance. It won't be lonely, you won't be lost, you won't be hungry, that there's life available for you there. That's the type of light that Jesus is talking about. And he continues on, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all those who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to God the Father who is in heaven. So Jesus is saying that we as the church, as Christ followers, we're supposed to be like that. We're supposed to be a lamp that is emanating out light that draws people towards him. And what I love about what Jesus is saying here is if we just be who people were supposed to be in Jesus, you won't have to do much. You don't have to hide the light. It just emanates. It impacts people. If we allow the gospel to impact us and allow his Spirit to work in and through us, we're like a city who cannot be hidden. It doesn't have to try to shine in the darkness. It just does. Just be Christians who believe in the gospel. Be the church and be the light, and you won't be able to stop it from shining. Jesus says it's like you'd have to put a basket over it. It doesn't balance. You get the point though, right? That doesn't make sense. I'm trying to make it work and it's hard to. Now it just looks like it's from Pottery Barn. But you get the point, right? You get the point. That's what Jesus says. You'd have to do something counterintuitive to the gospel in order to shut down the light that's supposed to be emanating out of the church. And that's why we're so excited to build our home. When we look at that graphic, which I forgot to import, but like this, you see the light. We want to be a church that the light is literally always on in the building, so people know that we're here and we exist and we want to be part of the community. But then figuratively, the light in us as Christ followers of the people of Two Rivers Church, that as we leave the building, that we're light to wherever God scatters us and sends us. So the question becomes, how do we shine the light that Jesus is talking about? How do we emanate this light around us? And I love how Romans 12 answers this question, because I believe he gives us 5 commands that if we just do these things, that it would bring light into darkness. So if you have your Bibles, you can turn to Romans chapter 12, verses 14 through 16. And if you've been with us in this series, we've looked at Romans 12 just about every week. And 2 weeks ago, John spoke about how we are to be a caring family. And we looked at verses 9 through 13. The emphasis 2 weeks ago was more about how we go about sharing Jesus' love with each other as a family of believers. But this week, the emphasis is more about how we go about shining that light, that love outside of our walls, beyond our walls, and how we impact others around us with his life-transforming message of Jesus. To see that, we pick up in verse 14. So read with me. Not out loud, but you can read along with me. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another and do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Never be wise in your own sight. All right, so we got lampstands up here. We got 5 commands that we're going to look at. I already have one light on, so let this one represent our first light that we're to shine. And that's a resilient love that chooses to bless people regardless of how they treat you. In verse 14, it says, bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. It's interesting that Paul states this as a matter of fact, like bless those who persecute you, not if you're persecuted. Paul states this as it's gonna happen. You who are Christians, we're going to be persecuted. He says, bless those who persecute. And here's the reality, if you're a Christ follower, not everyone is going to love that you love Jesus. Not everyone's going to love that you love Jesus. There are going to be people that find out that you're a Christian and just automatically lump you and say, "Ugh, you're one of those people. You're a bigot, or you're a hypocrite, or you're judgmental." And Paul knows this, and he warns us to this, and he tells us, when you have these feelings, don't retaliate. Jesus even warns us right before in Matthew chapter 5, right before the light analogy, he tells us, blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you. It's like Jesus is warning us, hey, if you follow me, persecution is going to come in many different forms. A huge spectrum, we'll see in just a second. But he says, hey, look at my own life, Jesus is talking, and look how I was persecuted, and look how I responded. Now go and do likewise. And I love that then Paul gives us this first lamp of blessing, because when we choose to bless those regardless of how we're treated, it shines the light of the gospel. And this is exactly what Jesus did to us. He loved us when we weren't interested in him. He loved us even when we were not interested in him, when we were hateful towards him, when we were persecuting him, when we thought life was all about us and not about him. He patiently and resiliently went on loving us anyway. That's what resilient love is all about. It's a posture that says, I exist to bless you and to love you no matter how you're treating me. I don't know about you, but when we hear persecution, like that seems harsh. You're like, I can deal with like someone calling me a bad name or treating me a little bit poorly, but persecuted, like how far is this resilient love supposed to go? I don't know if you thought that, I did, and I hope you did. It's a great question. Paul's writing this word persecuted. Bless those who persecute you. Just check this out real quick. Paul, who formerly is known as Saul, was there when they persecuted a guy named Stephen. You can read about it in Acts chapter 7. In fact, we see just a chapter later in Acts chapter 8 that Saul says that he agreed with them putting him to death, Stephen to death. Acts chapter 7 says actually that Saul was there and they laid the cloaks at his feet as though he was standing there in approval. And as they are killing Stephen, Saul being there, Saul hears these words from Stephen, Lord, do not hold this sin against them. Stephen, in the midst of his persecution, prays directly or indirectly for Paul. And Paul witnessed this resilient love. And it's not too far after that, because of that prayer and because of God's master plan, Jesus steps in and intervenes and transforms Saul's life, who becomes Paul. Paul goes from being the persecutor to the persecuted. And to the Christians in Rome, Paul writes and says, seek to bless those who persecute you. How crazy countercultural is that? But how beautiful is that? And thankfully, none of us are going through that level of persecution, I hope, in this room. But what Paul is doing right here is he's setting the outer limits of how far our gospel love is supposed to go. That even if it did ramp up that bad, that someone hates you so much that they want to harm you, kill you for your faith, that your response as a Christian would be to follow Jesus is saying and say, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they're doing, to seek to love them, to seek to bless them, to want eternal good for them, to despite the horrible and horrendous bad they want for you. And so for us in our culture, we're not there, but there are forms of persecution, things like getting made fun of, things like getting mocked or treated kind of strange or different, maybe getting passed up for a promotion, maybe even getting moved on from a job, getting fired because of your beliefs. And the command here is don't get mad in response. Don't retaliate. And not only retaliate, but go a whole step further and actively seek to bless those people. Actively go out of your way to look for ways to make life better for them. And that's beautiful because when you persecute, or when you bless those who persecute you, it shines a light in the darkness. And when you wake up each day expecting persecution, expecting for maybe some of these bad things to happen in your life, you wake up with the posture of, I don't care necessarily how I'm treated. I'm going to be here to bless people, to love people the same way that Jesus did. And that's how you impact the world around you. So here's my practical application. Questions to ask this week. Who's treating you like an enemy in your life? Is there someone in your life right now that just kind of looks at you a little bit different, treats you a little bit different, a little bit strange? Pray for them this week. And as you're praying, ask Jesus to show you an opportunity to go out of your way to bless them, to catch them off guard, to show them resilient love. That's lamp number 1. I got to speed up. All right, lamp number 2. Here we go. It's a fearlessness that chooses to be with people regardless of their circumstances, all right? Verse 15, rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. Do you have people in your life that they're your go-tos? Like when you get good news or bad news, like they're the first ones you call or talk with to share said news about. Well, if it's the best news, they're like your hype men, right? Like they just get super excited for you, more excited even than you may be about the news you're giving. Or on the adverse, the other side of that, are there people in your life where you share things with because when you're going through the storms of life, they're the ones you know will be right by your side. They won't try to necessarily fix the problem, but they'll be there for you. Paul here is saying this is the kind of people Christians are supposed to be, the ones that people want to be around and celebrate and mourn. We're supposed to be the kind of people that whether there's a party or mourning, people want you there. Now, this is a light that kind of has that distinct, like in here as a church and then out there in the world aspect to it. So in here as a church, celebrate and mourn with mourn. 2 weeks ago, John talked about how Jesus' love calls us to be a caring family. And this includes that we would belong to each other in such a way that when we're mourning, that I would be there, we would be there mourning with you. It's more than just saying, I'm sorry or I feel bad for you. Let me add you to my prayer list. But it's a type of mourning where you're saying, I'm going to step in the grief, in the mess of life with you and be there with you. Now, you might hear that and be like, well, duh, that sounds amazing. Yeah, we should all be that type of people. But honestly, for me, this is an area of my life that can be hard. Why? Because I don't want to say the wrong thing. Right? Or I don't want to step into a situation where I might feel a little bit awkward because I might say the wrong thing or there might be other people already trying to like carry the burden with them. And so I don't want to be that extra person. So I make all these kinds of excuses. And over the years, I've had to learn that it's not as much about what you say. It's just about showing up and being. sometimes I have to get over myself and my discomfort for the sake of others. Why? Because that's the gospel. Jesus' discomfort wasn't more important to him than me being alone in the midst of my sin. And there should be a fearlessness as a Christ follower saying, I don't care what you're going through. I'm going to be there with you in the midst of it. If we could be a church that practices that well, that in your life group, if stuff happens, that you don't just, oh, I'm so sorry. But when you learn of the news, you show up on the doorstep. You grieve with them. You cry with them. You hold them. That's how we shine the light. But it isn't just weep with those who weep. There's a flip side. It says rejoice with those who rejoice, to celebrate with those. Man, what if we could be a church that knows how to party? And here's the idea that if the gospel is true and Jesus died on the cross to rescue us from our sin, then there's never a moment in our lives where we don't have a source of joy and a hope and a reason to party. And I think these are important, the aspects, the mourn and the celebrate, because this isn't just how we mourn and celebrate with each other. It's a lamp that shines beyond these walls. A few years ago, a study was done with Americans, and a question was asked, how many close confidants do you have to talk to about what's going on in your life? And the most popular answer in this poll was 0. We as a culture don't know how to do this because we're all busy, we're all important. We don't want to get your messiness into my life. I got my own problems, and Christians should have a fearlessness of saying, no, I want to step in. I don't care what you're going through. I want to walk through it with you. And where it really gets interesting is this partying aspect, right? Like Jesus liked to party. He liked to eat good food and be with people and eat with sinners. But I think as Christians, somehow our bent has become that if there's any chance to party with people, we opt out of maybe fearlessness when Jesus says, no, rejoice with those who rejoice. And the problem is when we don't step in to the mess of people or and the joys of people and the mess of people, sometimes Christians get a bad perception maybe. Like maybe one is we're boring. We get a stigma of having no joy, and we can't engage with people or at least understand why they're celebrating and what they're celebrating and try to connect with people at that level. But then also, I think other things that can happen is that we protect ourselves and become so inward focused that we'll party with each other, but not out there. And if we're not careful, it can communicate that we're judgmental, legalistic, closed off from the outside world. And in order to shine the light of Jesus, to impact the world around us, when in doubt, we need to go there. We need to be with people. Don't go alone, right? God's placed other people, other believers in our lives for accountability, but go as light. Be engaged. Go and love on people. Go be light that shines, that doesn't cover it, but let the joy shine. Let the empathy shine. Let the ability to mourn with those who mourn shine. That's lamp number 2, practical application. In your life group, in your neighborhood, in your workplace, who is rejoicing or mourning right now? And how can you be with them in the midst of that? Number 3, lamp number 3. Here we go. It's a grace that chooses to make peace with people regardless of conflict. Now, of these 5 commands we talked about in here and out there, this one, I think, specifically talking to us as a family of believers. I think Paul knew that the better we love each other inside these walls, the brighter the light will be around us, the greater the impact we'll have collectively as the people of God. As brothers and sisters, as families, we choose to live in harmony. And so when it comes to our relationships with each other, because of the gospel, the good news of Jesus, the transformation that has taken place in our life, as God's people, we don't let sin linger. We don't let conflict remain. We don't let walls remain. We don't let unreconciled relationships remain. We deal with conflict. We hand it to Jesus. We ask him for forgiveness. We ask him for the ability to forgive the other person. We reconcile with the other person, and we move on in harmony. And when we can't practice this as a caring family, I think it hurts our light. It dims our light. The lamps of the city start to flicker, and everyone starts to notice. When people get close to the city on a hill, they hear us shredding people apart with gossip, drama. When people can sense a sense of bitterness or anger between us because we haven't dealt with our conflict and we're not in harmony. Our unity in here affects our reputation out there. It affects the brightness of the light shining and out there. And as we're doing life with people, and specifically non-Christians, as we're doing life with them, how cool would it be that as you're starting to do life with neighbors and coworkers, and maybe they get the invite to your life group, that they start getting subtle differences of saying, wow, you guys have problems just like the rest of the world, but for whatever reason, it just seems like you deal with it faster. Like there's a graciousness and a forgiveness that flows quickly. Practical application. Who are you in relational conflict with right now? And have you done everything possible to make peace? A couple verses later in verse 18, he's going to say, as far as it's up to you, as much as possible, live at peace with everyone. Sometimes it's impossible, but my question is, have I done everything possible to live at peace with one another, to humble yourself, to ask for forgiveness? And I think the challenge here is to think about the gospel, think about God, and what great lengths God went to go through to make peace with me, and now I should go and do likewise. So that's lamp number 3. Lamp number 4 is a security that chooses to embrace people regardless of their social status. It says, do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. It's a funny word, haughty. You can use that one this week. But basically he's saying, don't set your mind or to seek high things such as honors and riches. Don't aspire for those things, but instead associate with the lowly. It's a confidence that says, I have such high status in the gospel that I'm willing to embrace people who have no social status to speak of and nothing to offer me. To embrace people who have no social status and to speak of, or to nothing to offer me. I have 3 girls, and I get to see human nature at its finest, whether it's in them or in me as I'm parenting. But this last year, I coached one of my daughters. For the sake of the story, she'll remain nameless. But I coached her team, and we lost a particular game, and it's me and her in the car on the way home, and it was just quiet. Not because it was intense, but it was just like, that wasn't fun, losing, and it wasn't even close. And all out of nowhere, she's just like, hey, Daddy, why is Jack on our team? I was like, that's a weird question. Like, he signed up, I don't know. And she's like, no, like, why is he on our team? I was like, what do you mean? Help me out. Help me understand. She's like, he's just really bad. He doesn't seem to get it. He doesn't seem like he wants to play. He doesn't really help us win. He's just there. And I turned around and said, you just put into words what I was thinking. I'm just kidding. I didn't say that. But she was voicing something that I do think we're all prone to think. We all have certain people. We're all prone to certain people. This is just something that's messed up in our sinful, self-righteous state, that we're prone to look at certain people and say, probably at a subconscious level, but say like, yeah, they're pretty bad, or they have nothing to offer me. But for every one of us, there's just someone who bothers you, just annoys you. You just can't take them. It's that guy or that girl at church even. Maybe it's a coworker. Maybe it's a neighbor, someone who says something off the cuff that's trying to be part of the conversation, but when they say it, it just doesn't really connect, and you try to help it connect, but it's been a long day, and you don't have the energy, the patience to help include them, and so you're just over it. You ever been there? You're just annoyed? I know I have. And the reality is, if we're being honest, we all gravitate towards certain people because they're funny, they're nice, they're easy to be around. Maybe we think that they're mature or drama-free. We all drift away from certain people who are awkward and cost us a lot of time and energy. But the gospel dictates that we be a whole different kind of community, a community of people who understands that because of Jesus' blood, that I have been set unbelievably, undeservedly high, that I've been given grand royal status in God's family, and I didn't do anything to earn it. And I just want it for other people now because I have it. I have the confidence and the security that I don't need you to give me anything that I don't already have in Jesus. And there's a humility that says, I didn't do anything to earn it, so why would I look down on you? We want to be people that has a security that chooses to embrace people regardless of their social status. Practical application. Who is the hardest person God has put in your life for you to love? This week, remember the gospel and ask the Lord for his strength and his love to love that person. Lamp number 5. Lamp number 5 says that we have a humility that chooses to respect people regardless of their views. It's the last part of verse 16. It says, never be wise in your own sight. When I read that, you guys are getting full Tim Tullis today. I don't know if you're as arrogant as me, okay? But when I read that sentence, I go, what do you mean, never be wise in your own sight? I'm always wise in my own sight. Like everything I do in life is because I think it's wise. If I thought something else was wiser, I would do that thing, right? Everything I choose to do is awesome. It's great. It's the best idea ever until it's not. And then I beat myself up for it. But I'm still at the center of the universe. When in Philippians chapter 2, let each of you not look down on your own interests, but the interests of others. Have the mind of yourself, which is of Christ Jesus, who though was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but he emptied himself, taking on the form of a servant. I have a tendency to look down and choose to look at other people who have different views than I do as though I'm superior than them. And I need to be reminded of the gospel. It's like in the most kind of sinful state, if I'm not careful, I'm the center of my universe. But the reality is being the center of the universe doesn't work if we're going to be a lamp, if we're going to be a city on a hill, if we're going to shine the love of Jesus and have an impact around on the world around us. We've got to capture a humility that says, I needed Jesus to die in my place and to pour out his blood selflessly to make me righteous. And that humbles me in such a deep kind of way. And if I'm not careful, I don't look at other people, or I look at other people of like, they need Jesus. When in reality, I need Jesus and they need Jesus. If I'm not careful and I don't have a gospel-centered mindset, I can come off as arrogant and superior and self-centered. I can have a tendency to be uncaring and not understanding and caring more about being right than caring about the person I'm speaking with. I don't ask good questions. I don't pray while I'm having a conversation, asking the Spirit of God to help guide me as I engage in discussion. I forget that they need the same Jesus that I need. I'm not being a light. Practical application. What aspects of another person are most likely to make you feel superior to them? This week, how can you pray for continued gospel reminders and a renewed humility? That was a lot. So what? We got 5 lights shining. Here's what I know. With all of these lights shining, this is the type of light that stomps out darkness. A resilient love, a fearless pursuit, a grace that makes peace, a security to embrace, a humility to respect. That if I have the light of Jesus and these things working in my life, that it stomps out darkness. It pushes back I'm in a cave and my flashlight's about to die. I'm in the desert, in the wilderness, longing for hope, food, life type of light. It stomps out that type of darkness. And that my life has been transformed by Jesus so that I can be that type of light in the world that God has placed me, that we can be that type of light in whatever context, whatever neighborhood, whatever workplace, whatever school you attend, whatever the context where God has placed you, whatever family he has placed you in, with the friends he's placed around you, that we can be each one of these lights to them with the hope and the prayer that draws them and stomps out darkness. Oh, that we be a place that we connect people to a caring family that is being transformed by Jesus, that we haven't arrived, that it's a process, that each one of these lights, I'm going to be better at it in some days than others, but I'm constantly coming back to the truth and being reminded of the truth of who Jesus is and how he's worked in my life, and that because of that, then I can have that resilient love, that fearless pursuit, that grace that makes peace, the security to embrace people, and a humility to respect people regardless of their views. So we can impact the world around us.